My Uncle Marcus served with the local police department for 16 years in Silver Springs, one of those towns you'd miss if you blinked while driving through. The biggest excitement they usually got was busting up meth labs hidden in abandoned barns or catching teenagers smoking behind the school. Most of his stories were the kind you'd expect. A few break-ins here, some domestic disputes there, but nothing that would make the evening news. But there was that one thing, the thing that made him turn in his badge. Marcus kept that story buried deep, wouldn't even tell my Aunt Elena about it. We all figured he'd just gotten tired of the lousy pay and dealing with strung-out addicts in the middle of the night. But last week, he called me out of the blue, his voice rough like he hadn't slept in years. "I need to tell someone before it eats me alive," he said, "but you can't breathe a word of this to Elena." I agreed, figuring I'm still keeping that promise since Elena doesn't know about this forum. We arranged to meet, him bringing the beer, me bringing the notebook. I found it strange how he wanted this documented but wouldn't tell his wife. Some stories need to be preserved, even if they can't be shared with the ones closest to us. We met at the Sleepless Inn, one of those roadside motels where the neon sign flickers more than it glows. This place wasn't exactly a roach motel, but it had that tired look of somewhere that had given up on ever being nice again. Faded blue paint peeled from the walls like old scabs, and the concrete was webbed with cracks where weeds pushed through. The desk clerk barely looked up from her ancient fishing magazine when Marcus paid cash for 3 nights. Our room smelled like decades of cigarettes and broken dreams, with mustard-colored carpet that had seen better days sometime during the Carter administration. The bedspread, a sad pattern of burgundy and beige stripes, looked like it had been washed sometime this century, at least. Marcus triple-locked the door behind us. Then he turned to me with eyes that had seen too much. "You know why I got this room?" I waited. "Because I can't stay in Silver Springs another night. Something's wrong there. It's been wrong for a while now." "What do you mean?" I asked, watching him sink onto the bed with a creak that sounded like a dying animal. "You have to understand something about Silver Springs," Marcus said, opening his second beer. "These woods, they've always been wrong. Back in the 1800s, the first settlers here wrote about children wandering into Sawyer's woods and coming back speaking languages that they never heard before. In 1943, an entire kindergarten class went missing during a nature walk. They found them 3 days later. 3 days later. All 20 kids sitting in a perfect circle around that same lightning-struck oak, singing some kind of lullaby that made the search party's ears bleed. Town council tried to keep it quiet, of course. You know, you can't have that kind of thing in the tourist brochures. But every few decades, something happens that can't be explained away. A summer camp that burned down in '76, where they found all the beds full of mannequins instead of bodies. The elementary school art show in '89, where every single kid drew the same tall figure with green eyes, even though they were in different classes and hadn't seen each other's work yet. Town's gotten sick. Kids vanishing in the woods. People seeing things that ain't there. Like something's poisoned the ground itself. He cracked open the third beer, foam spilling over his trembling fingers. Last month, 3 more children went missing in those same woods. They found them alive, thank God, but they came back different. Won't talk about what they saw, just drew pictures of a tall black figure. He took another long drink. "You remember the Coopers?" It took me a moment, then it hit me like a punch to the gut. The Coopers. Oh, the family that killed themselves? Well, that's what the official report says. He wiped his mouth, leaving the beer can sweating on the scratched nightstand. But that ain't what happened. Not even close. And then he told me everything. David and Rachel Cooper moved to Silver Springs in '92, fresh-faced and full of dreams. Their son Tommy was barely walking, and their daughter Grace still wore pigtails and believed in fairy tales. David sold houses, Rachel raised the kids, and they were living in that small-town American dream right up until May of 2002, when both children were found dead in Sawyer's Woods. There's something else I never told anyone, Marcus said, his voice barely audible over the motel's humming air conditioner. The day before the Cooper kids went missing, I saw them at the local ice cream shop. They were so happy, sharing a sundae with chocolate sauce and rainbow sprinkles. Grace had ice cream all over her face, and Tommy was trying to steal her cherry. I remember thinking how lucky they were, having such a normal childhood in our quiet little town. Then the next morning, when the call came in about the missing children, I was the first on scene, and there on the picnic table where they disappeared was a half-eaten melted sundae. But the ice cream was black as tar. The container was still the same, Sally Soft Serve. The search for those kids? Marcus shuddered. That was something else entirely. We had over 100 volunteers combing those woods, but it was like the forest itself was playing tricks on us. Our search dogs would follow a scent, then suddenly start whimpering and backing away. The search team's compasses would spin wildly, and radios picked up children's whispers singing nursery rhymes and static. On the fourth day, one of our search teams found a tea party set up in a clearing. Tiny chairs arranged around a stump, with cookies and cups, still warm like they'd just been abandoned. Cookies were black as coal, and they had a strange symbol pressed onto them. And when we tried to photograph the scene, every picture came out showing empty chairs with a tall shadow behind them. Now, the search parties combed those woods for a week before they found them, 2 miles from the picnic site, deep in a part of Sawyer Woods locals called the Devil's Acre. The children were curled together at the base of a lightning-struck oak, their small bodies untouched by animals or decay, as if even the scavengers knew better than to disturb them. The coroner ruled it exposure and dehydration, but couldn't explain why their eyes were still wide open, fixed on something in the canopy above. David's real estate office called us about 2 months before everything went down. They said David had been acting strange during showings, standing in empty children's rooms for hours, whispering to himself. His last client ran out of a viewing when she found him in the basement, painting the same symbol on the wall in what looked like fresh blood. It turned out to be red paint, but still, the company fired him that day. He just laughed and said his real work was just beginning. The parents fell apart in different ways. Rachel became a ghost of herself, floating through rooms, whispering, "My fault, my fault," while David tried to hold them both together with trembling hands and hollow reassurances. Everyone said it was just a terrible accident, but the Coopers carried guilt like a second skin. And for a while, they did seem to be healing, as much as anyone can heal from losing their children. But then the whispers started. People said David was visiting psychics in neighboring towns, spending thousands on mediums who claimed they could contact the dead. Rachel was seen buying books on ancient religions, occult practices, Hell, anything that promised a way to pierce the veil between life and death. And by 2006, they'd become shadows. They stopped showing up at church, at the grocery store, anywhere. No one saw them, and their house sat dark and silent like a tomb. Mail piling up until someone called the police for a welfare check in 2008. And then that's when things got really strange. The station got a call from the Cooper house, just breathing on the line. It was wet and ragged like someone drowning. When we pulled up to their colonial-style home, the wrongness hit me like a physical force. The lawn had gone feral, yellow patches spreading like disease. Windows were filmed over with grime, and the air felt thick, like breathing through wet cotton. After no response to our knocks and yelling, we breached the door. Now, the smell hit us first, chemical and sweet, like decay mixed with burning plastic. The living room looked like a bomb had gone off in a convenience store. Snack wrappers and empty cans everywhere. Dust lay thick as funeral shrouds on every surface. And the house itself seemed to breathe. It was subtle shifts in the floorboards, whispers in the walls that might have been settling wood or something else entirely. Our flashlight beams caught dust motes that danced in patterns too deliberate to be random, like they were spelling out words just beyond comprehension. Grace's bedroom door was different from all the others, decorated with crayon drawings that definitely weren't there when the children were alive, and they showed the same scene over and over. A tall, dark figure leading two smaller ones by the hand toward what looked like a door made of twisted trees. The drawings got progressively darker and more frantic toward the bottom of the door, like whoever drew them was running out of time. We found them in Grace's old bedroom upstairs. But what we found there, well, that's what really haunts me. The walls were covered in that symbol, not just the basic pentagrams and crosses you'd expect from amateur occultists, but something that hurt your eyes to look at. A shape that seemed to move when you weren't watching it directly. And right below it, David and Rachel lay dead on the floor, but it's what was in the closet that made me question everything I knew about reality. A mannequin stood there, painted midnight black with that same symbol traced in crimson and gold. But this was no department store dummy. Its proportions were slightly wrong. It wore a mask made from wood and bone and God knows what else, with real human hair woven into it. And the eyes were probably the worst part, emerald green with pupils like bottomless wells. And I swear on my mother's grave, they followed us around the room while we were doing our investigation. The longer you looked at it, the more you noticed little details that shouldn't be there. The way its chest seemed to rise and fall ever so slightly. The faint warmth radiating from its plastic skin. And this thing wore Grace's favorite summer dress and Tommy's baseball cap, like some twisted attempt to recreate their children. But just behind it was an altar built from an old desk, covered in photographs and candles and, well, things I won't describe to you. Now, the worst part wasn't what we found in that house, Marcus continued, his voice dropping to barely whisper. It was what happened during the investigation. You see, every piece of evidence we would collect would change overnight in the evidence locker. Photos would show different scenes when we looked at them again. The audio recordings of our interviews with neighbors kept playing back, with children's whispers in the background, even though there weren't any kids present during the interviews. And that evidence from that Cooper case, man, it didn't just change. Some of it disappeared. Every photo we took of that mannequin came out blank. The audio recordings of our interviews started playing backwards, and anyone who listened to them started having the same nightmare. 2 children leading them through endless woods toward a door made of twisted trees. Now, the medical examiner who performed the autopsies on David and Rachel found her office full of black mannequins one morning, all wearing pieces of the Cooper's clothes. She quit that same day. She moved to Alaska, Anchorage, I think. Said she'd rather deal with months of darkness than spend another night in Silver Springs. And let me tell you about that symbol. Fuck that symbol. We tried to get experts from the FBI to analyze it, sent photos to universities, occult researchers. Every single person who studied it reported the same thing, that their children started drawing that symbol in their sleep, talking about a tall friend who wanted to play hide-and-seek in the woods. Now, Officer Richardson, the one who'd photographed the scene, found his daughter's dolls arranged in the same position as the Cooper kids were found in the woods. All of them painted black, all wearing tiny masks. He transferred to another department a few weeks later, moved his whole family to Arizona. Last I heard, they were still down there. The handwriting changed as well. Started out as Rachel's neat cursive, but by the end, it was jagged and frenzied, letters bleeding into each other like they were written in the dark. The final pages had those same symbols from the walls scattered between words, and the paper felt wrong somehow, like it was warm to the touch, like it was almost running a fever. But here's the part that kind of sealed the coffin for me to make me quit the force. While we were documenting the scene, that fucking mannequin moved. Not much, it was just a slight turn of the head, a twitch of those plastic fingers. But we found Rachel's letters on the altar behind it. They started normally enough. Grieving mother writing to her dead children, telling them about her day, how much she missed them. It was heartbreaking, it truly was, but the later ones, well, they talked about the children answering back. About midnight conversations and shadowy figures in the hallway, about a presence that promised to bring their babies home if they just performed certain rituals, followed certain rules. Now, a few months back, before this all started with Elena, I was getting coffee at Darlene's diner. You remember Darlene? Hell, she owned that place for 30 years, I think. Well, she pulled me aside, looking scared as I've ever seen her. Said her grandson, Billy, had been acting strange ever since he found an old baseball cap in their attic. Tommy Cooper's cap. Hell, I thought we had that in evidence. But the kid started talking about his tall friend who visits at night, promising to take him somewhere special. Darlene found him sleepwalking 3 nights in a row, always heading towards the woods. The last time he was carrying 2 sets of black clothes and singing that same lullaby the kindergarten class was singing back in 43. As if that wasn't enough, Marcus said, his voice trembling. It's not just the obvious stuff, the missing kids, the symbol, the mannequin. It's the little things that show how deep this goes. Did you know the town's birth rate dropped to almost 0 after the Cooper incident? Well, except for the twins. Always twins. Hell, you've seen them. Every set of twins born in Silver Springs since 2008 have been born with that symbol as birthmarks somewhere on their bodies. I went to investigate that a little bit. The local pediatrician, Dr. Matthews, started keeping records. Well, she noticed that twin births always peaked around the anniversary of when the Cooper kids disappeared, and every single set of twins would draw the same picture on their first day of kindergarten. Again, a tall figure holding hands with two smaller ones, walking towards a door made of trees. Last year, she tried to publish her findings in a medical journal. The night before she was supposed to send in her research, her office burned down. They found all her patient files arranged in a circle on the floor, untouched by the fire, with a mannequin sitting in the center. Whole town's like that now. Parents won't let their kids play outside after dark. The school board had to remove all mannequins from the drama department after students reported seeing them dance during assembly. Hell, even the church had to take down their nativity scene because the baby Jesus figure kept turning up in different poses, its eyes painted that same haunting green. One of the poses, it was giving everybody the middle finger. Silver Springs never been the same, Marcus continued, his voice hoarse. People really started to notice things. Strange and odd things like the playground behind the elementary school would be full of black handprints every morning, too high up for any child to reach. The library had to remove all their mannequins from the children's section after kids started saying that they were staring at them. Now, last month, Mrs. Peterson's kindergarten class went into lockdown because every kid started to scream at once. When the principal asked what was going on, they all pointed to the same corner of the room and said, "The tall man." There was nothing there, of course. Not that adults could see anyway. Now, the last letter I received from Rachel was dated 3 days before we found them, and it read, "The thing about evil like this," Marcus said, staring at his trembling hands, "is that it spreads." Now, after we found the Coopers, things started happening all over town. Pets would vanish only to return days later with their fur dyed black and their eyes changed. Children started talking about a new friend they'd made, one who wore their dead siblings' clothes and promised to take them somewhere special. And the local daycare had to shut down after parents complained about their kids drawing that symbol everywhere. And after every time we investigated, every single time, we found something that brought us right back to that mannequin we found in that closet. A footprint, just too wrong to be a human. A scrap of Grace's dress. Tommy's baseball cap placed carefully in the center of the scene. That baseball cap. I don't know how it got around, but it did. Marcus's phone buzzed again. His hand shook so badly he almost dropped it. Elena's sending more messages. Says she could hear Tommy and Grace singing outside her bedroom window now. Says they're asking her to come play with them. He showed me the latest photos she'd sent. Their backyard captured in the gray morning light. In the background, barely visible through the fog, stood 3 figures. 2 small ones in outdated children's clothes, and between them, something tall and black with gleaming green eyes. Marcus's phone lit up with another text. This time, his face went beyond pale. It turned gray. Elena says... His voice cracked. She says she just found something in our attic. A box we never put there. It's full of children's clothes, all black, all with that symbol stitched into it. There's a note. He had to take several deep breaths before continuing. A note in Gracie's handwriting saying, "For the new members of our family." Alright, anyway, I did some digging after I quit the force. Marcus shakily continued, opening another beer with shaking hands. I found out that the land where the Cooper house stands, it used to be an old clothing store back in the late 1890s, burned down under mysterious circumstances. I spent weeks in the town library after I read that. Marcus said, pulling out his photo to show me some photos he'd taken of old newspapers. Found out that before the clothing store, there was something else on that land. The original settlers wrote about finding strange stone formations there. Circles of black rocks with that same symbol carved into them. The native tribes wouldn't go near the place. Said it was a thin spot where something could reach through. And another thing that I dug up at the library, every major construction project in Silver Springs has uncovered a similar symbol. When they built the elementary school in 1935, they found it carved into the bedrock. When they dug the foundation for the church in 1962, they found a chamber full of stone statues arranged in a circle. The town historian who documented all this disappeared while researching the symbol. They found his journal in the woods, the pages filled with drawings of children dancing around a tall figure. Now, the only thing that survived that clothing store fire was a single mannequin, almost perfectly preserved despite the inferno that melted the steel around it. The newspaper article described it as unusually tall, with eyes that seemed to follow you. Town tried to destroy it, burned it, buried it, even tried to dump it in the lake, but it always came back, showing up in people's homes, in their photos, in their children's drawings. So you're probably thinking, what the hell does an old clothing store have to do with anything? But I'll tell you what, that Cooper house was built on that same spot, using some of the old store's foundation even. And in every family that's lived there since, the pattern repeats. 2 children disappear, the parents go mad trying to get them back. And that mannequin or that thing, well, everybody thinks that it just keeps collecting. Thing is, Marcus whispered, Tommy and Grace Cooper would be in their 30s now. But in every photo, every sighting, they're still the same age they were when they died. Like something's been preserving them, keeping them young, and now it wants Elena to join their little family. That thing shows up in the strangest places. Marcus continued scrolling through his phone. School photos, wedding videos, security camera footage. Always in the background, always watching. Here, check this one out. It's a photo from the town's centennial celebration in 1901. Here, look. He showed me a sepia-toned image of the town square, in the crowd of people wearing period clothing. There it was. A tall, dark figure standing head and shoulders above everyone else. Those distinctive green eyes somehow visible, even in the ancient photograph. And here's the really fucked up part. Every person standing near it in that photo lost children within the year. Every single one. I tracked their family histories. Pattern goes back centuries. It's always the same. Children go missing, parents go mad trying to get them back, and that thing just keeps collecting. Now, the David and Rachel case was officially ruled a suicide, but I know what I saw in that room. Something answered those parents' desperate prayers, all right. Something that wore their children's clothes and spoke with their voices and promised to make everything better. Marcus pulled out an ultrasound photo from his wallet. Elena's doctor couldn't explain it, he said, hand shaking as he pointed to something in the grainy image. You see this mark here? The one that looks like a tattoo on both of them? They're the same symbols that we found in the Cooper house. And watch this. He held the ultrasound photo up to the light. In the background, barely visible, was a tall, dark mark with a gleaming green smear. The technician who took this said she kept hearing strange whispers in the ultrasound room, even when it was empty. And every time she did another ultrasound, that figure would be there in the background somehow, getting closer and closer to the twins in the image. And I've been doing more research since Elena got pregnant. Marcus said, pulling out a thick folder from his bag. "Every family that's lost twins to that thing, or children even, they all reported the same sequence of events. First, it appears in family photos. Then the symbol starts showing up in dreams and random doodles and completely unexpected places. And finally, the children start talking about their new friend who wants to take them somewhere special. But here's what nobody else has figured out. It's just not collecting children. It's building something. You see, every pair of twins it takes, every single child, they show up in other people's stories, other towns' legends, always as these perfect, ageless children leading other kids away. It's like it's creating some kind of family, a growing army of eternal children, all connected to that thing in the woods. And now, with Elena pregnant with twins, God." He couldn't finish the sentence. The implications hung in the air like smoke. "I found a photo album in their basement. You know, Rachel and David. It had pictures going back to the house's construction. Every family photo standing in the background. That same mannequin. Different clothes each time, but those same green eyes." Marcus' phone chimed again with another text. This time, he didn't even look at it. He continued, his voice cracking. "Last night, before I left, I found something in our mailbox. 2 tiny black outfits, size for newborns, with that symbol stitched in gold thread, and a note that said, 'We've been waiting for more playmates.'" Marcus's phone buzzed again on the nightstand. He picked it up, and then went pale. It's Elena again. Says she heard children laughing in her backyard last night while I was gone, but when she looked outside, he showed me the message. She saw 3 sets of footprints in the morning dew. 2 small ones, and one with strangely long toes leading right up to our bedroom window. You see, that's why I had to get out of there. I couldn't tell her what I saw on our security camera. He pulled out his phone with trembling fingers and showed me a different screen. But this, you can't tell Elaine about this, but this is what I saw before I left. The picture showed his front lawn at night, the mannequin barely visible in the darkness. But what made my blood run cold was the 2 small figures standing on either side of it, holding its hands. They were wearing Grace and Tommy's clothes. "They've been waiting all these years," Marcus whispered, "waiting for someone else to bring home."